strikeouts in a game. 20.
Swung on and driven to deep left. And it's high. No score. Yankees win. Yankees win. Bernie Williams homers deep in the left field seat to lead off the 11th inning at a 1-run win. And the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-4 to win Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. Burn, baby, burn. He's done it again.
Deep left. There it goes. Turning into history. He's done it. He has done it. 62. Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader. The AL King. Case closed.
What is going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Ladderquente here, back at it again for the Baseball Banter Broadcast, and we continue our series here, the state of the franchise. From championship glory to rebuilding years, every team has a story. And today, the story that we're discussing is that of the Detroit Tigers. Now, before we get into it, make sure if you haven't, you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as the bell for post notifications, as it does help us continue to grow this baseball community. And make sure you check out our link tree in the description below for all the pertinence to our merch store, sponsor links, including tops, as well as our social platforms and audio platforms. And today, to help me discuss the Detroit Tigers, I want to bring on my guests, Jake Boes and Rogelio Castillo from the Motor City Metrics. What's going on, guys?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely, guys. It's a pleasure to have you guys on board to talk some Tigers baseball. Now, as we kind of jump into the series here, I always like to get a little bit of a retrospective and a gut reaction to the previous campaign. So for you guys, what is kind of that gut feeling on the 2024 Tiger season?
I like to think it was, to me, the gut instinct was just a lot of things lining up, like just a lot of luck. A lot of luck that the pitching chaos worked, that they took advantage of a bunch of injuries that really the staff was just in disarray. And you look at some of the numbers down on the guys they brought up beforehand, which goes to show you don't ever judge a box score, as Jake can attest to. And it really just the Twins falling apart. It's kind of like for Tiger fans, kind of a little bit of karma from the 2008 season and the Twins' history of the Tigers in 87 as well, going back a little bit even further. So watching it unfold and going down there and then getting the run on the field with the team after they clinched a playoff berth was just something that in my gut now, I'm still like just get that butterfly feeling. It's just it was just very surreal.
Yeah, for me, it was like magic. That was the word that kept coming in my brain as I watched it all unfold, is like, this shouldn't be happening, and it is, and they sold at the deadline, right? You thought that they were kind of mailing it in, and then, they brought up these kids and just performed. It just worked. And just so happened that they had some injuries on the position player side of the ball too, and gave them an opportunity to bring some guys up, see what they got, and they just took it and ran with it. And yeah, it did take some help, but at the end of the day, I mean, they won a playoff series, so it was just magical. It really was, and totally unexpected.
Yeah, it was a great team to watch, especially as an outsider looking in and seeing that pitching chaos. It was just incredible to watch, and you kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it seemed like it never did. So it was definitely a fun watch as a baseball fan, seeing, how the Tigers kind of went about it last year and making that, what some would say was an improbable postseason run. Now, as we look towards this upcoming season, the Tigers may not have been one of the overly active teams, but they went out and made some serious moves, bringing in Jack Flaherty, Gleyber Torres, Alex Cobb, Tommy Kahnle. Of these moves, what's kind of the one that stands out the most for you guys?
Well, I think Gleyber Torres does because based off the fact that the Tigers defensively last year were a plus team, and Torres comes in with a little bit of reputation of having not great defense. And although the second half of the year indicates that, and you have Cole Keith as you signed into a long-term extension. So that surprised me quite a bit. But they also needed a bat really bad. They needed to, and I know they were trying to chase Alex Bregman, and then you hear about the Anthony Soler, Santar, trying to chase him as well. But Torres comes in, he's doing the show me contract, which I think benefits the Tigers quite a bit. But I just also was kind of confused because the logjam you created with Cole Keith there. You have Spencer Torkelson, who's also he's in a make or break year where essentially he has to start showing why he was number one pick overall. And so I don't know, that was one of those things where I expected the Tigers to go after some more swing and miss guys out of the bullpen, maybe address the outfield depth, because I kept saying, and I'm still pretty adamant about this, injuries are going to happen, and we're seeing that right now in unfolding camp.
Yeah, I'll agree with Gleyber Torres. I think they needed a right-handed bat in the worst way, and I think at the time we didn't realize it, but I think they kind of viewed it as Bregman insurance. They kind of thought that, okay, well, we'll get our bat, and then if we get Bregman, great, and that ended up dragging on forever. But just to kind of look at it from a different perspective, I was surprised by the Alex Cobb deal because it was so early. He's old. He didn't pitch very much last year, and they signed him to a $15 million deal. That was one of those contracts that you thought would be there in late February after you get an injury or something like that. It wasn't something that you thought would happen, right as free agency was beginning, and they went out and got him. And you look at some of the other pitchers that signed since, guys like Max Scherzer for similar money, make you wonder if that was really the best move at the time.
Yeah, definitely interesting questions that, can be asked of that front office right now, and kind of examining those moves, as you mentioned, Rogelio, about the fact that the Tigers defense was so good. And when you have, kind of the pitching chaos be the form that you're using, having good defenders behind you is a must. As a Yankee fan, seeing Gleyber up close, there was many times where the ball was hit towards that second base side, and you were nervous that a simple routine play was going to be made. So it's going to be a real question to me how the Tigers and their pitching chaos formula is going to work with that. Moving Cole Keith, as you said, to first base, kind of dispelling Torkelson and what's going to happen with him now. So to me, it makes the Gleyber move was a lot more questions that had to be answered than answers that were given with that move. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. And like you said, Jake, about bringing Cobb on so early, there were other guys that you potentially could have given that kind of contract to. Scherzer, maybe going back to Verlander, and kind of a reunion there for somebody that was a bit more proven and wasn't as big of a question in terms of overall health. I think that, Cobb is a guy that if he's well, can be an asset, but at that dollar figure, that's the same kind of dollar figure that 40-year-old legends are getting in this game. So a lot of questions that have to be asked with some of the moves that were made by the Tigers. Now, as we kind of look towards, this season, injuries always play a factor. There are some guys that are question marks. For me, the biggest one, and I'll ask you guys in a moment your thoughts on it, but to me, Javi Baez, how does he recover from the hip surgery? Is he going to be the guy that we saw be such a dynamic player, El Mago, with the Cubs, or is he going to be the guy that kind of signed an albatross of a contract for Detroit? What are your thoughts on Javi and any other injury concerns?
I think that Baez is the most athletic shortstop they have on the roster. I think he is still a capable defender. I think that as both of you guys know that these players sometimes play hurt. So how long he's been playing hurt for is beyond, we don't know. Has he always been a bad swinger? Yes. I have to remind Tiger fans all the time that this is the guy that they signed. Don't ask the pro. It still baffles me sometimes when Tiger fans are just like, well, he was an arbitrage to the contract. Yeah, but that was his stuff beforehand, and you had no problem with that whatsoever. Be that as it may, I think that the platoon situation with Sweeney is good for him because it doesn't put all the pressure on Baez, who's been a good teammate. He's been a good clubhouse presence. There's nothing bad to be said about that. And I think Tiger fans have been really kind of, again, I understand why. They've spent a lot of money, again, but it's also not your money, also, A. And B, Baez is a guy who, when healthy, is a productive player. So I think that this is a year for him that I think he's going to have a bigger chip on his shoulder than he has before. And I personally think that, yes, he struggles with just chasing bad pitches, but that's just his MO. But if he can be a somewhat a better defender, I know his metrics last year were one of the worst, but again, your hip, your side-to-side movement, how much of that affected him? We don't know. We'll see this year. But I think that the platoon situation is the right situation for him.
Yeah, I think Baez is the X factor just because of the impact that he could have. They have the contract. He's going to be there. A lot of people thought that he should have been cut right after the season last year. There's no sense in doing that. He's having surgery, see what you got to work with and see if you got something there. But you think about, he plays a premium position defensively at shortstop, right? So if he is healthy and he is back to himself, at least on the defensive side of the ball, that alone is an asset. And then if he can hit enough, because he does play such a premium position, you don't have to hit, like a first baseman at shortstop. If you're playing good defense, you still have value, right? So if he can hit enough and he can play his old shortstop and he is healthy, absolutely massive. But going back to injuries, I think the center field situation has become kind of the storyline of spring for Detroit.
Yeah, so expand more on that for those that may not know.
Sure. So Parker Meadows was kind of the first one to go down, and left-handed bat. He's kind of the catalyst of the team in a lot of ways. Plays elite defense in center field. There were teammates that thought he was going to win a Gold Glove this year in center field. Still could. He's got a nerve issue going on where it's one of those things, the nerve just has to wake up, I guess, and they don't know the timetable of when that's going to happen. So in the meantime, everybody's just kind of twiddling their thumbs, waiting for him to kind of come back. So he's kind of a question mark for opening day, and they've already ruled out Matt Vierling, who many feel is probably the backup there. They have Winfield Perez that can move around the outfield as well, but it's not the greatest situation in center field right now. And what they're doing right now is borrowing from some of their corner spots to kind of fill that in. It's just not ideal.
Yeah, and Winfield is a guy who he's a switch hitter, but he hits better on his other side than he does on his natural side. And he's a guy who at one point in time in the minor leagues, once upon a time, was a infielder, but he started having the yips and has moved to a pretty decent defender in the outfield. And I think that the one thing that, and I mentioned this at the top of the show, that the reason why I thought the Tigers should get another bat in the outfield is because if you look at their farm system right now, a lot of their guys in AAA and AA are, especially in AAA, are 4A guys. You don't really have, outside of, Max Clark being the next big thing. Max Clark is still about a year or two away because he hasn't even played AA ball yet. And I think, and knowing that for you Yankee people that are Yankee fans out there, the Eastern League is a true test. If you can hit in the Eastern League, then you can survive at the big league level. Max Clark hasn't passed that yet. And they just have a bunch of guys right now who are kind of in Toledo who have a couple of tools, but they're just stopgap measures. And so a guy like Justin Henry Malloy, for example, is not an outfielder. He's not. He is a DH or a first baseman at this point. And so I think that the Tigers right now have to consider alternatives. And even we had a chance to talk to the voice of the Tigers, Dan Dickerson, and what the pitcher Matt Manning is considered. He thinks he might be on his way out. So why don't you use a trade like Matt Manning to get yourself a fourth outfielder to fill the void, if possible, because that might be the situation they're heading into.
Yeah, very interesting takes. I think that, when you look at what the AL Central could be, injuries are going to be the biggest factor for which team comes out victorious in that division. You mentioned earlier, Jake, about the X Factor, and that's kind of one of my favorite segments in this series. So, is he your X Factor for the Tigers this year, or just an injury X Factor?
I think he's just the X factor for the team. He changes the complexion of the left side of the infield after missing out on Bregman, and he changes the complexion of the lineup if he just hits enough. We just don't need all of the swing and miss that we had the last couple of years. If he can just do enough to get by, it changes the entire bottom half of the lineup. And like I said, it changes the left side of that infield now that they kind of missed out on a Gold Glove short third baseman like Bregman.
And
Yeah,
what about for you?
as far as the X factor goes, I think the biggest one for me, and this is something that is, I think it's a guy like Casey Mize. And the reason why I think Casey Mize or even like a guy like Reese Olson is because you have Tarek Skubal, you know what you're going to get from Tarek Skubal. You know what you're going to get from Jack Flaherty or John. Yeah, you're going to get from Flaherty. What you don't know what you're going to get from, in a sense, is Olson and Mize and the rest of that rotation in that fifth spot. So are the Tigers going to put Jackson Jobe out there, their number one prospect, one of the top prospects in baseball? If I could put pitching as, I guess, the starting rotation, that's to me is the biggest X factor because you're going to have pitching chaos all over again. And I don't know if the Tigers can survive pitching chaos all season long like that. And I think a guy like Casey Mize, who's coming with increased velocity on his slider, has shown really good stuff so far in camp. And then you have a guy like Guido Montero, who is got really good stuff, but it still needs to work on his command. And Reese Olson, good stuff as well. But the command, the walks are a little too high. Those to me are with what we have with Jackson Jobe. Do you put him out there and let him get a little bit beat up, or do you wait and do the thing where you get him another year because you're time manipulation for his rookie deal? Those are things that the Tigers have to consider right now because the reason why they made why they signed Alex Cobb, it makes sense. You can never have enough pitching. Well, I would have given them that kind of money, but still, I think that a guy like Casey Mize coming in this camp really has to go out there and shove and show why he, again, same thing like Torkelson, have something to prove. You were the number one overall pick and you haven't pitched really a full season in 2 years now. So that to me that's so critical for this Tiger staff to even in a conversation with the likes of the Twins or Cleveland to win a division.
No, for sure. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out. For me, the guy in my preparation for this series that I pegged as the X factor is Cole Keith. The move to first base, how's that going to translate? The demands of first base kind of viewed and looked at as a power position, a middle of the order kind of position. How does that translate for him defensively, offensively? Is it going to be something that kind of then affects the morale with Torkelson getting bumped off that spot? How does it affect the entirety of the team? So he's kind of the guy that I look to. You signed him to that long-term extension. This is going to be a guy that is viewed as like the face of the franchise going forward. So, where does all of that kind of pressure mount for him mentally, physically, and does he be able to take that and translate it to success on the field? So he's kind of the guy that I pegged as the X factor. Now, Rogelio mentioned the prospects and Jackson Jobe, the top prospect. Now, what can you guys tell us about him, and if there's any other prospects that you're kind of paying attention to this year?
Well, I think that what you know about Jackson Jobe is that he's learning a curveball. In addition to go with this sweeper slider fastball combination, and he threw a couple curveballs yesterday against Pittsburgh, but it still needs a little bit of work, and it still needs kind of some more snap action to it. I personally think that it's a pitch that for him will be good on, especially against a right-handed lineup, or I'm sorry, on lefties, where he can grab the outside part of the corner. As far as prospects go, I was mentioning Guido Montero earlier as a guy to look out for because I think he's a guy who he's been among the leaders and minor leaguers in innings pitched the last several seasons for the Tigers. And he's a guy who I think is going to continue to evolve as a starter. He's a workhorse. He throws 4 or 5 good pitches. And I mean, he's just a guy who I think his command's going to continue to get better. And another prospect I think that a lot of people like, and rightfully so, and the guy's coming in his own a little bit, is Justin Henry Malloy, who is a right-handed bat, thankfully, not this left-handed bat. And I think he's a guy who will continue to get better. He has a very good eye at the plate already. And now when he finds a position, I think that's going to help him get better. And Trey Sweeney, who the Tigers picked up last year from the Dodgers, he had a couple hits today. Seems like he's hitting out of a slump a little bit, but defensively, he's the reason why that combination for Baez will platoon wise. As far as prospects go on the horizon, a guy that I really like in camp that's going to be starting his first year in Double A is the Roberto Campos, the Cuban outfielder who the Tigers spent quite a bit of money on. He's a guy who I really like his upside. He was horrible defensively a couple of years ago, but he's cleaned up his act and has become a solid outfielder. Now it's just a question of if he can hit at that next level. And of course, I couldn't go without mentioning that Thayron Lozaro, who is just this big beast, who looks like Victor Martinez, had a bomb yesterday against the Pirates. He's a guy who is, if he can start dominating Double A, that's some good cooking for the Tigers there.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a fun squad to watch, when you have such young players that are, coming up and contributing, as you saw last year in that, kind of improbable run. Having a young guy as the ace in the staff in Tarek Skubal, just continuing to get better and better every year. Now, as we look towards the season, and one of the good spots of this particular series is the bold prediction. So what do you guys have as a bold prediction for the Tigers this year?
Jake, I'll let you go with this one first.
Well, we talked about him. So yeah, I'll jump in here because we talked about him already. But my bold prediction was that Casey Mize would establish himself, but as a bullpen piece. And I know that kind of comes across as a little bit crazy, maybe premature. I think, to be clear, I think he'll get every chance to start, right? I think they want to make that work. He was the first overall pick. They gave him a ton of money. He's pitched decently well, really. I think that they have so much depth with starting pitching. They're going to have Cobb. I think they want Job to throw significant innings in Detroit this year. You got Skubal, you got Flaherty, you got Montero, you got Olsen, you got, the list goes on and on of starting pitchers. And that doesn't even get to some of those chaos guys that they got that were starting, guys like Herter and Gunther and all the other pieces. I think that there's a situation where Mize, maybe he goes on the IL for a little bit, comes back. There's not really a spot for him, so they stick him in the pen. And I think he just kind of sticks. So I had the same sort of prediction with Bo Brisky last year. I think Mize is the guy that could make that transition. He's already had an uptick in velocity, so it's not going to be an issue for him in terms of, short spurts. He might hit 98, 99 for an inning. And it's really just going to be an issue of secondary and having that out pitch for him.
And for you, Rogelio, bold prediction.
Bold prediction. That's a good. I'm trying to think about this in a logic. I think Dylan Dingler. A bold prediction for me is a guy like Dylan Dingler steps up and starts taking over the starting catching role from Jake Rogers, because I think offensively he's going to have a better upside. I think I've liked Dingler in camp so far. He's a guy who already calls a good game, similar to Jake Rogers, but he's a lot more athletic than Rogers, and he's starting to hit those sliders, those pitches that he struggled with. And I think if he can continue to do that and continue to show progress, this is a guy who I really have liked the Tigers since he struggled. And all catchers kind of struggle when they on their way up, but he started really hitting the ball with a lot of authority down in Toledo. And then when he got called up a little bit, it wasn't there, but he started to make adjustments. And I think that my bold prediction for him, I think he's a guy who can go in and hit 250, 260 and take over bulk of the Tiger game's catching. I think he's going to be more than a capable backup, which is why I think the Tigers felt comfortable enough not to go seek a veteran. They have a bunch of 4A guys. I do like Jake's prediction about Casey Mize. It makes a lot of sense. I just still think I think he's more, if you could give him swing and miss stuff because of guy like, for example, Jason Foley, who struggled today, and he struggled towards the tail end of last year to get that swing and miss, and it makes a lot of sense to put Mize in the bullpen. but it really depends on how they set up the rest of the rotation in AAA as well. So, but that's I think to kind of be a little different. I think Dylan Dingler's guy to look out for this year.
Yes,
That's interesting too, because he's like struggled every time he's advanced. He's struggled for a little bit, and then he figures it out. And then he gets to the next level. He struggles a little bit, and he's figured it out. And he kind of struggled a little bit last year. So now, he would be due for some production. I think some uptick offensively. I like that take.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a good take. Especially with the way that team is so young and kind of building, having that young backstop there that can kind of be that offensive force is a good move for sure. And in my prep for this, I think that my bold prediction is not bold at all. I think that the Tigers are going to extend Tarek Skubal and announce, a long-term extension in Detroit to keep him there. And I think he goes on to win back-to-back Cy Young. So I don't think that it's very bold, but that's kind of where I see it happening on both ends of that. I think that the Tigers are going to try to lock him up long-term, make it nice and easy. They have this guy locked in for a good long-term contract, and he goes out and pitches like the ace that we know him to be and goes back-to-back in the Cy Young race.
Dude, Tigers fans would call that bold for sure. Maybe not so much the Cy Young side of it, but the extension side, there's not a lot of optimism around that, but that would be amazing. Fans would be thrilled.
Yeah. Well, let's see by putting it in the air if that takes hold.
Well, now, I mean, that would be outstanding. I mean, I think the Tiger fans want that extension really bad. I don't know. Like if Tiger fans heard me say this out loud, and I'm gonna say this out loud. I always worry about, do you do the Tampa Bay rule? Do you not extend pitchers past the age of 30? But I think with Skubal, you do make an exception.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, what we saw from him and kind of the maturation over the last, through the pitching chaos times of the last couple of months, just the guy was just dominant in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. And it's a guy that you have to build your franchise around because he was just so dominant. And I think that approaching him and seeing what that number would look like early and trying to make a reasonable effort to achieve that is something that the Tigers have to pay attention to and have to take a look at. Now, as we kind of look towards the organization, what do you guys see as the biggest question facing the team in 2025?
Where the right-handed power bat's going to be, that's going to be consistent. I mean, I know it sounds like we've been beaten to death a little bit, but I think that concerns me the most because the Tigers are a team that need to score more runs. I mean, last year against Cleveland, you could see the running out of gas. You could see a guy like Stephen Kwan, for example, for Cleveland. He's a guy who can get on base anytime he wants, and he will fight pitches off. And I think if Riley Green continues, I think if Riley Green can continue to evolve his game, that's going to be a big development. I think that's going to be a guy that's going to give you a 6 or 7 more season. That's a guy who's going to carry your team a little bit if he stays healthy, of course, because health has always been a concern with him. I really think that, but then after that, it's kind of like a lot of question marks. I mean, if Cole Keith can be the Cole Keith that we saw tear through the minors, hit 20 or 30 home runs, that's going to help out big time. But that's just what I'm concerned is if Kerry Carpenter, and I've said this on my podcast numerous times, and I always joke about this. If you have a bad back, it's just your back always lingers. You do so much with your back. But if you can stay healthy and go out there, and Carpenter's such a good dynamic guy in terms of like providing the carry bombs and carry bonds and all those things about Kerry Carpenter when he's healthy. If he's not healthy, then that's where I just kind of question if who's the guy who's going to step up. Or there's too many of these unproven things, and you think that naturally they're going to progress. Of course, you want that to believe that, but I'm always worried about this because the Tigers have done this to us before in the past, where they have these guys that I don't want to say fleeting or anything. I'm not going to try to say that, but it's just I want another model. I just need the Tigers to be consistent, show some model of consistency, which they haven't shown yet.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of it, I think it's whether or not they're going to hit enough. Are they going to hit enough To me, they have enough arms. The pitching factory is in full force. Like they have enough guys to withstand a season. I feel fairly confident in that. My biggest question is, are they going to hit enough? And going back to Rogelio's point too about the whole left side, right side. The reason that fans are so on this whole right-handed bat situation is it got exposed so bad against Cleveland. They watched Matt Boyd just carve up the Tigers. And it's because the reliable bats in the Tigers lineup are Kerry Carpenter, left-handed bat, Riley Green, left-handed bat, Colt Keith, left-handed. It makes it difficult, right? So I think that is going to be the question that many Tigers fans are going to be curious throughout the season to kind of pay attention to is, are they going to get overly exposed against left-handed pitching throughout the year?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting for me, as an outsider kind of looking in and seeing how that plays out, because we know balance is such an important thing. And the way that the opposing managers attack lineups, especially with the 3-batter minimum, if you have so many stacked lefties, it becomes a very easy, window for pitchers to navigate against. And especially when you have, hitters that are very similar in their approach, that kind of all or nothing approach where they're not taking like a Stephen Kwan approach and kind of taking the ball and shooting it the other way. So it's going to be interesting to see where they, get that balance, where they get that, kind of right-handed pop to kind of break up the lefties. And, you mentioned Riley Green in my top 10 left fielders right now. I really believe highly in Riley Green. I had him at number 5 on my list. And I think that he can have a very big year for the Tigers, and he can be a big factor for success, but it's going to be, kind of who else can you pair with that and seeing how that kind of plays out. So I think a very interesting question to kind of pay attention to as we run through the 2025 campaign. So then what would you guys say is the biggest frustration?
I would say for me, it's just a matter of who's going to be the guy to come up and do the swing and miss stuff out of the bullpen. Because, I look at this bullpen right now, and it's a good bullpen. Don't get me wrong. It's not disputing it. But then I kind of think, like, Tyler Holton's has pitched over 100 and something odd innings the last 2 years. So, you got to make sure he's healthy. Will Vest is a guy who I can easily see kind of sink back a little bit sometimes. He's a guy who was quietly, he had a good year last year. But who's the guy who's going to then come up and get those? You look at the staff as a whole in terms of K per 9. The guy who leads the team is Tommy. Who they signed just from the Yankees, and that's it. He's a guy he's averaging about 9.2 K per 9. Who's going to be that guy that's going to come in and step up a little bit? When I think of Tiger bullpens in the past, I think of guys that like Joel Zamaya. I think of, you make fun of Jose Valverde, but the guy went out there and did his thing. But there was a couple. They had guys that could set it up. Albuquerque comes to mind too, but
Fernando Rodney.
Fernando Rodney. There's a bunch of those guys that you can pin back to a little bit that had a good strikeout, like good swing and miss stuff. That is a concern to me because the Tigers, if they don't have that, what are they have the pitchers. They have a guy like Ty Madden right now, who is a starter in the minor leagues, who came up last year. There's a couple guys you can maybe consider, but that's again them learning the new position as they go on. And so I don't know, that is annoying to me. I think the Tigers could have spent that money from Cobb and addressed it with a guy like, I don't know, Jeff Hoffman. Maybe something like that, but I thought they would have a little more advantage of getting a more experienced high leverage reliever.
For me, it's the offense, not addressing that in a meaningful way. I know Torres will probably do some things for the Tigers, but overall, they just have not done enough through free agency and trade to really upgrade the lineup in a way that many thought was necessary in order to kind of take that next step. It's like, okay, you feel like you're gaining some momentum. And now it kind of feels like that momentum is lost in the offseason because you don't really do much. They missed out on Bregman, but leave that alone. There's other right-handed bats that they could have signed, whether that's Santander, Christian Walker. There's other guys they could have signed and would have been an upgrade and would have been a more natural fit than somebody like Gleyber Torres into the lineup. To me, that's the biggest frustration is, you have all of this pitching, you have Tarek Skubal for 2 more years, and you're not pressing that foot on the gas pedal enough for most fans.
Yeah, I think, again, we kind of spoke about this at the top of the show, but, the signing of Gleyber Torres to me was such a curious move because when you looked at this squad, you saw a young core, you saw your Cole Keith as your second baseman. You had Trey Sweeney that came up and started to play pretty well for you guys. You have Jace Young that's going to come in and play some third base. You had Torkelson, who was, number 1 overall pick. And obviously, you had some different spells of regression and, struggles, but that's going to happen with a young team. But then you bring in a guy like Gleyber Torres, who's kind of, set in his ways. The Yankees last year traded for Jazz Chisholm with the intent to put him at second base and move Gleyber to third. And he was adamant. He wasn't doing it. He's a second baseman. And now you come to a team where realistically third base was the necessity, not necessarily second base. And now you dispel your second baseman and move him to first. You now move your first baseman, who was a number 1 overall pick, now to the bench. Now, how does that affect the rest of the squad? So I thought that it was one of those things where, as a baseball fan looking in from the outside, having had Gleyber last year, yes, there are points of the year where he's going to be a phenomenal asset. When the Yankees moved him last year into the leadoff spot, he was a huge help for the Yankees offensively. But then there was those defensive lapses and those mental lapses. And you see a team like Detroit that's on the rise, that has this young core that they're building around. You said you have Skubal for the next 2 years. You have to push that pedal, and you have to go for it. And to me, like you said, the frustration of not going for it offensively and not going and really trying to pull the best possible offensive core to be able to support that pitching staff, to be able to support the ace of all aces in Skubal. So it's an interesting play to me to see kind of almost being stuck in the middle, which is where I kind of see Detroit right now. Now, in terms of the team itself, right? How do you guys grade out the offense?
In terms of like a B, C, D, I'm gonna give it right now like a C+, B- right now, because you're going to see games like today, for example, against Toronto. Again, I know spring training doesn't matter, it doesn't count, but you're going to see a lot of, I think, early on in the season, a lot of quick at bats. If I think they're going to struggle with scoring runners in scoring position early on this year, because it's just going to take some time to get that cohesion going. But again, like as you guys were talking about earlier, exposed to all those lefty bats. You don't have the right-handed bat to really, outside of getting if you don't have another power right-handed bat, if Torkelson gets off to a bad start, you're screwed. I mean, and Torkelson is already kind of, like I said, where are you going to put him? It's going to be the DH or whatever you're going to put him. But I think that the Tigers can't afford a slow start offensively. And we saw that last year, and I think that's going to be the case this year. And I think that if they have to really, do something, I don't want to say drastic per se, but if you're going to start the season with not having Parker Meadows, not having Matt Verling, you're already putting yourself in a hole a little bit. So I think the Tigers have to. I thought that Scott Harris was going to make a trade because they have prospect capital to actually play with a little bit, and they didn't. And so that's why I give the offense such a. I think it's not. It is far. They don't even have like that team speed. Like they can't even use an X factor. Like, oh, they'll steal bases. No, it's not. They're not exactly the. They're trying to be a fast team, but they're not a fast team.
Yeah, it's a solid C average for me. It's too left-handed, as we talked about. Ideally, assuming health, you're looking at Meadows, Green, Carpenter, Keith at your top. And what do all of those guys have in common, right? They're left-handed bats. So you kind of forced to break that up. That's unfortunate. And like we said, they didn't really do what we considered obvious upgrades offensively. So they missed out there. To me, the offense, they had some timely hitting. Carey has some good power. They don't have guys with loud tools right now. There's not a guy that has extreme bat to ball skills. They don't have a guy that has this loud 40 home run potential in them. It's really just kind of a cast of characters who, maybe 260, if they do what they're supposed to do and, everything goes as expected. But acting like somebody, Meadows was sent down last year. So to pencil him in for, 260 and 20 bombs, it's realistic, but it's also realistic that he could get sent down again, right? And the defense is so good in center field, you can kind of put up with some of the offensive struggles with him. But with him, potentially missing opening day, that could be a struggle for him. It could be another slow start. So where do you go from there? It's concerning offensively for me. It really is.
Yeah, I'm kind of in lockstep with you guys. I had it as like a B- C+ as well. The maturation of some of those bats, the Riley Greens, the Kerry Carpenters, the Cole Keiths, can really help elevate this lineup. The addition offensively of Gleyber Torres, I think, is going to help. That right-handed bat that you guys spoke about needing, and the way that he can approach at bats. When the Yankees moved him to the leadoff spot, he became one of the Yankees' best hitters in terms of seeing pitches and working at bats. And it was something that he struggled with early on. And once he was able to find that groove, he actually became a real asset for the Yankees after having sat him for a little while because he just wasn't giving his all, and it was clear. But being able to add that in, a guy who's going to play with a chip on his shoulder, who's going to be motivated to try to get that, long-term deal, try to prove himself in a different lineup, I think it's going to be an asset. I think if we can get, the Javi Baez that we saw from the World Series winning Cubs, that is a Javi Baez that obviously is going to have swing and miss, but he's going to be able to do some damage. He's going to be able to, come up with some timely hits, because that was one of the big things with him was, obviously the glove is there, El Mago, the magician, but he also had the magical bat at times. So if they can get some of that back and maybe potentially make a move or two at the deadline with some of that prospect capital that's in the minors, or with some of that pitching capital that you have, it's going to be an interesting play. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, how do you grade out the pitching staff?
I give the starting staff a B. I think the starting staff is going to be serviceable. I think that there's enough potential there between the prospects and what they have in a pretty established rotation is there to, I think a B+ would be ideal because they have enough courses to get them there, as far as Flaherty and Skubal, and even with the potential of whatever you have in a 3-headed horse between Reese Olson, Jackson Joe, Montero, or Mize, however you see fit to finish that end of the rotation. I think the Tigers have done a really good job of developing pitching, and that's going to show here. As far as the bullpen goes, I give it a C+ because I just don't see it. I don't see, or a C, really. I just don't see a guy that's going to come out. Jason Foley struggled today. I'm looking for a guy that's going to go in there and wipe out, and I don't see that yet with that bullpen.
Yeah, I gave the pitching an A. I think that they have the best pitcher in the American League in Tarek Skubal. I think that the fact that they were able to bring back Flaherty, which I kind of scoffed at the time after they traded him away, everybody was like, well, you can sign him back. You can sign him back. And you can, but how often does that happen, right? And you were able to get him at such a team-friendly deal coming off of the season that he had. To me, that was a major win. You have enough young guys between Reese Olson and Casey Mize and Keeter Montero, and there's enough depth there to, withstand an injury like Cobb is dealing with right now, where it doesn't really sting as much as it normally would. And, on the rotation side too, we didn't even know spring training last year who guys like Brant Herter and Sean Gunther and some of these guys were that just kind of came out of nowhere. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, well, even if those guys go down, there's still some guys hanging back in AAA that will just come up and shove because Chris Fetter works his magic and sees something. So in the back of my mind, I just kind of almost defer to them in that regard of like, you guys got it, do your thing. So that's kind of how I view, from the starting pitching side anyway. From the bullpen, it is a concern that they don't have a no crap closer, so to speak, a guy that you can't count on to give you 3 outs, 1, 2, 3, get a couple of strikeouts, set them down. It's not really that kind of bullpen, but I think, bullpen pitchers are the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Inconsistent year to year. So having the depth that they have, even though they don't have this bona fide fireman, setup guy, I think there's enough depth there where they can play the mixing and matching game that we saw in part in the playoffs with guys like Holton, guys like Vest, guys like Brisky, where you can kind of piece it together and ride the hot hand and still be effective.
Yeah, in my preparation and kind of looking at this, I had it as a B+, and I think any staff that has Tarek Skubal has to be given at least a B grade, at least a above average grading. And I think that the depth that they brought in, bringing back Flaherty, I think was huge, and that's kind of what pushed it up a little bit further for me. Having that 1-2 punch, if you can get Cobb back healthy, that's a nice solid middle of the rotation, back into the rotation kind of guy, and then you have those young pieces that are kind of question marks in Olsen and Mize and what potentially happens with Job and Montero. I think that there's a lot to like with that starting rotation and what it's potentially capable of doing. And I think that what you saw in the way that AJ Hinch managed that bullpen last year, to me, while you may not have the typical prototypical swing and miss that you would like from a big time closer, having those guys that can be mixed and matched, having those guys that can come out and still be reliable enough to get out is something that is a positive, and the depth that you mentioned that they have. And if they go and make that bold move that you mentioned, Jake, and moving Mize to the bullpen, that could be the guy that is that swing and miss lockdown 9th inning guy with the stuff that we know he's capable of having. So I think it's going to be an interesting team. Like I said, for me, I kind of graded it as a B+ just because you can't have the ace of the world right now in Skubal and not give it an above average grade. Now, when it comes to the divisional ranking predictions, Pacoda is more down on you guys than most other places and most people that I've spoken to. But Pacoda has the Tigers in 4th place with 79 wins, and Fangraphs has them coming in at 2nd with a 82-80 record. Where do you guys see the Tigers landing in the division, and what does that win total look like?
I'm going to kind of defer to Fangraphs there. I think 82, 83 wins is where I think it's cautiously the right number. And I think it's the reason why I think it's the right number is because I think if you look at the Tigers pitching wise, they have just too strong of pitching just to be a 79 win team is to me is kind of insane. I mean, under 500, you have to have a lot of things go wrong. And if a lot of things go wrong that way, then I can see that. But I think the Tigers have enough. They've earned enough health, if you will, and I think their pitching is going to carry them. The starting pitcher is going to carry them early on, and so any more than 82, 83 is because of the offense is a concern. So if they address the offense before the end of spring training, they somehow make a trade and they get an impactful bat, then yeah, you can talk a little bit higher. But I think 83, 84 wins is in that realm, and I think I predicted 83 last year. I'm going to stick with it again this year because it's just. They don't have that right-handed hammer, and unless a miracle happens in that regard, I still think that they're just this division. The Twins are sneakily good. I mean, I think they have more pitching than what people lead on to believe. The Royals have had really good off. The Royals had a quietly good offseason, and they are committed to being competitive. I don't think they have enough horses to get there, but the Royals are going to be a pain in the butt, and Cleveland's going to be Cleveland. Cleveland's just, that's what they are. And I think the White Sox are still a couple years away from being even relevant in the conversation. So that being said, I think that right there is a good sweet spot for the Tigers.
Yeah, in the prospect world, I would say the Detroit Tigers, if the Detroit Tigers were a prospect, I would say they have a high floor and a low ceiling. and those totals kind of speak to that, right? Because, 79 wins, fourth place looks kind of rough, but 79 to 82 wins, to me, that's kind of their floor and their ceiling. I think they're going to be somewhere in there somewhere. And depending on injuries and depending on what they do at the trade deadline, that could kind of swing the numbers a little bit. But I don't think any Detroit Tigers fan is coming into the season expecting 90 wins. I don't think that's really where this team is based off of what they've done in the season. I think they're a wild card team, at the end of the day. I don't really see them winning this division until they show that they can do so. I think there's too much competition otherwise, like Rogelio was saying. The White Sox are what the White Sox are, but realistically, I could see anybody else taking the division. So, the odds are kind of against them as far as the percentages go there.
Yeah, so I kind of agree to an extent with you guys. I'm a little bit more bullish on all four teams kind of beating up on the White Sox and padding that win total a little bit. I think it's going to be a super competitive division all season long between the four teams, the Twins, Tigers, Royals, and Guardians. I think that the Tigers and the Guardians are going to basically finish out in the same spot. I think you guys are going to end up in second because I think you'll have the season series, but I think it's going to be about 86 wins. I think that there's going to be a few more wins that you get against the White Sox that other divisions just aren't going to get, and having those more competitive, AL West and AL East squads. So I think that the Tigers, Guardians, Twins, and Royals are all going to get a few more wins than are projected because of, I think the White Sox are going to be worse than what they're projected. So I think that that's where that's going to kind of shake out for you guys. So I see you guys coming in second in the division, beating out the Guardians, even though you'll end up with the same record in terms of the projections that I have, based on absolutely nothing but my gut feeling. And so I think that it's going to be a fun division for sure. Now, as we kind of bring things down to the end here using the title of the series, where do you guys see the state of the franchise for the Detroit Tigers?
I will say this. I mean, I've watched this team for a long time, and I think that the future of the Tigers is I think they're in good shape. I think that for the first time that as an adult male that I've seen the Tigers actually develop a farm system that is developing talent. I mean, you look at the Baseball America lists and all the other various lists, the prospect lists are just like, you can be like, you can say, oh, they're subjective, but a lot of those guys are always bullish. Like Keith Law is always bullish on the Tigers, but he's actually showing some favoritism. There is some actual progress with the Tigers. And if they can take the next evolution of developing hitters like they can pitchers, that's going to be a game changer. And I think that that's going to help out the Tigers, because the Tigers, and Jake and I have talked about this for 30 plus years. It's not like the Yankees, where the Yankees, you can go on, there's more than a handful of infield prospects or catchers or outfielders the Yankees have developed. Tigers haven't really developed. They haven't had a homegrown third baseman that wasn't, I mean, you can argue about Brandon Inge all day long, but he was technically a catcher. I can go count on one hand. On one hand, how many prospects the Tigers develop as far as being in Detroit. You could talk about Suarez. You could talk about some of the other guys, but they have not had homegrown prospects. And that to me is the fact that they're getting guys like Max Clark. Kevin McGonigal is a guy who was a 70 grade hit tool. And that's just, you don't use that 70 grade just lightly. The guy can hit anywhere. And they actually have prospect talent. Again, just taking that next level of being productive players. They are investing in the facilities. I mean, talking to some of the minor leaguers a couple of years ago, they started having actual nutrition and chicken and stuff like that you think like we take for granted every day. And then they are upgrading the facilities. Like now down in Lakeland, you can pitch you can pitch when it rains outside, when before it wasn't a covered field at all. Now they have covered fields down there. Things that like just little things that you can think of in other organizations. If you go down to Steinbrenner Field, that place is immaculate. I've been there a couple times. Is a well-ran oil machine. Now it's starting to kind of look like that in Lakeland. It's not just the Tigers are investing in their players. They're having player profiles, things that the other teams are doing. I think that's a bright future for a team that when a few years ago, when we used to talk to guys and go, hey, what does the team have you working on? Oh, I was just doing my thing. It's a far different cry than when you talk to Goddard Montero now, and he's telling us that for the first time they gave him a translated plan in Spanish. They didn't do that before. I mean, come on. It's just the little things that we take for granted. And then here they are, they're doing them now. And I think that says a lot. It's just common to us or to anybody else, any other organization, common sense. Now they're practicing it.
Yeah, them having a plan in general has been huge for the organization. The narrative from Tigers fans was always, you have this bevy of prospects and Casey Mize and Matt Manning and Tarek Skubal is kind of the three-headed horse. And what happens when those guys graduate? Riley Green was a part of that. And then Torkelson, we're kind of the big five, right? Once they graduate, then what, right? Now the system's going to be bare. And it really hasn't been. They've been able to effectively kind of transition and make it to where there's still talent there in spite of those guys graduating. It's been pretty remarkable. And as Rogelio was talking about, having a plan for these guys, having them work on specific things. And yeah, that conversation that you were having, that wasn't all that long ago. It's really come a long way with what they've done organizationally. I think a lot of foundational and detail-oriented type stuff that will ultimately make a difference in player development. My concern, looking at the overall picture and the competitiveness of the organization, I'm nervous that they're going to turn into the Steelers, right? Where they just kind of like back into the playoffs and the first round exit. And they're like, oh, well, we made the playoffs. That's cool. And they never actually put all the chips in and go for it. I really hope that they're able to do this sustainably, but in a way where they can actually make a run and not just be competitive or have a chance every year.
It's a great analogy. Great analogy.
Yeah, definitely a way to, kind of encapsulate all that has been the Tigers in the past season plus now. I want to thank you guys for joining me. This has been an insightful conversation, a fun conversation. I think that the Tigers are an interesting ball club to pay attention to this year. They kind of got that improbable run last year, kind of gave them a little bit more national exposure, I believe. And this year there should be a lot more eyes on the team itself. So once again, I want to thank you guys for joining me to be able to dive into the Tigers and the state of the franchise. Let everybody know where they can kind of get more content from you and more Tigers conversation.
So you can find me on X or Blue Sky or wherever at Rogelio Baseball, and then you can find all my content over at TigersMLReport.com, where we just did a top 46 top prospect list, and on our respective YouTube channels, Tiger Minor League Report and Motor Speed Metrics, and I don't think of anywhere else. Yeah, you can find us on those respective channels.
Rogelio's way more dedicated than me. I used to do some evaluation and things, kind of retired that, and I'm a Tyler dad these days. But I am on X, Boes Knows BB for baseball. If you want to chat, I'll be talking Tigers throughout the season for sure, and maybe I'll pick up the pen this summer. We'll see.
Please do. Miss you.
So as you guys can see, a lot of high hopes here for some Tigers fans, and you can definitely check them out for more coverage on Tigers baseball. As always, here on the YouTube side of things, if you want more coverage from us at the Baseball Banter Broadcast, you do so by hitting that like and subscribe, as well as the bell for post notifications. So each and every time we drop new content like the state of the Tigers franchise, you can be notified. As always, make sure you check out our link tree in the description below that has all the pertinent details to the merch store, the shopping links, including our new affiliate partnership with Topps, the sports card trading company. It does a big service to us if you purchase some merch through our link, as it does help us continue to build and bring you more from the Baseball Banter broadcast. If you're checking us out on the audio side, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review, as it does give us a bigger community and a better following to bring you more coverage and content on baseball. Once again, I want to thank you guys, Jake and Rogelio, for joining me on the state of the franchise to discuss the Tigers.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, man.
Absolutely, guys. And we will catch you guys on the next video. Peace.